Rappelling down a waterfall, horseback riding in the rainforest, Gary, Teresa, and Leslie are in Costa Rica. And it's complicated. You are watching Romance Recap on Reader Seeks Romance channel, and we're discussing the Fantasy Suites episode on The Golden Bachelor, Season 1, Episode 8. I am Liz Donatelli.
And I am Tiffany Current.
Join us as we discuss and dissect the second chance romance journey of widower Gary Turner as he searches for a partner with whom to share the sunset years of his life. Listen and subscribe to Romance Recap on Podbean and all podcast apps. Watch and subscribe to Romance Recap on Reader Seeks Romance's YouTube channel. Hello, Tiffany.
We are back again for another week, and I gotta say, for me, the phrase of the week is knocking boots.
Oh.
That's all that it was about this episode for me, and I was just cracking up most of the time. It was hilarious. I really enjoyed this episode. How about you?
You know what? I think I'm just so impatient that I was enjoying it, but I'm just like, come on, let's just get to it. Let's just pick who you're going with. We were exposed to many different Garys in this episode. We meet a cheeky Gary, a horny Gary, a super, super conflicted Gary, coffee drinking Gary,
yes,
bedhead Gary. You know, this is the many faces of Gary.
The bedhead Gary was hilarious to me. I love that image of him of like, what happened? Yes. But what I thought was interesting is we start off the show in this beautiful location of Costa Rica, which I've never been to before. I had no idea they had like volcanoes and stuff. That was beautiful.
Yeah, I did not know that. No, I have not been to Costa Rica. I said, yes, I've been several times. You'd be so shocked. It's gorgeous. I mean, the lush rainforest, the gorgeous waterfalls. I mean, it almost looked as if it was fake. It was so perfect.
It was beautiful. The random monkeys they kept showing. I'm like, okay, there's lots of monkeys there, apparently. What I found is interesting, I learned something new about Gary was that he retired at 55. I think I must have missed that. I was like, 55? This guy.
Wait,
did he said.
He mentioned that in this episode?
At the start of the episode, they said he retired at 55. And I was like, man, that restaurant life treated him very well to retire at 55.
Wow.
Good for him.
I knew that he retired before his departed wife because he said that he retired and then waited for his wife Tony to retire. So I figured he retired earlier than her, but I didn't think he retired earlier than most people.
I would say good for him. But for me, one of the funniest parts of the episode is that we open on this lush location. Yes. We have Jesse sitting down with Gary. And this is the most uncomfortable I have ever seen Jesse on any show ever. And it was hilarious to me.
Jesse was flustered.
Yes.
Because Jesse met cheeky Gary during this little chat. Jesse asks him, how important is intimacy to you? And Gary's like, well, define intimacy.
Yes. He was like, he was poking the bear there. He's poking him. Well, because by that point, I think Jesse had already asked him, like, what comes to mind when you think of the fantasy suites? He was trying to embarrass Gary. And straight up, Gary's like, obviously, knocking boots. Your parents probably do it. Yes. And right away, Jesse's like, TMI, too much information.
That's right. He did. He started in on Jesse's parents.
Yes, exactly. I was like, Gary was very cheeky. He just kept going with the sex thing because then from there, he said, I think Jesse's like, what are you most looking forward to? And he's just like, the pillow talk. I'm like, Gary, Jesus, what is going on?
But here's the thing. Okay, maybe I don't understand what pillow talk is because he mentions about liking the pillow talk because that conversation is at its most intimate, but he made it sound like it's when people are getting to know each other better. And I always thought pillow talk was more like sexy somethings whispered to each other.
That's what I thought it was too. No, I thought it was too. But according to him, he says he likes pillow talk because communication goes up because the barriers are down. I'm like, you've thought about this, Gary.
Oh, let me tell you something. He had a lot of interesting morsels of wisdom and insights. And I'm like, is he just coming up with all this on the fly? Or was he like preparing for this episode?
I don't know. But when I was watching his interaction with Jesse and how awkward and uncomfortable Jesse was, flustered, as you put it, I thought, you know what? If there's another season of The Golden Bachelor, I think Gary should be the host. I love Jesse. But I feel like Gary might be able to relate more with that
Yeah.
specific audience. He wasn't getting flustered by the knocking boots question. He's like, I've been doing this for like 70 years. I can talk about knocking boots all the time. And the fact that he said knocking boots was also hilarious. It's like, knocking boots.
Yeah.
I was like,
have you heard that expression before?
I have, but only when I watch movies from like the 70s. So I was like, okay. But I will say from there, Jesse goes directly in on the women. He's like, let's talk about the women. Yeah. Tell me about Leslie. Can you see it working out? And right away, Gary says she's like an onion to me. He keeps peeling back the layers and he's seeing more and more and liking more and more. And I thought that was actually kind of interesting how we put it that way.
Yeah, we definitely open this episode with Gary favoring Leslie.
Yes.
Because every answer he gives, every feeling he shares is about Leslie. And he says, you know, she's playful, she's adventurous. He could see her as a life partner.
Yes, I will. That is very interesting to me how we completely, without hesitation, said that. After that detailed description of Leslie, Jesse asked about Teresa, and there's a slight hesitation, and he says she's safe and warm. Totally different than like, you know, like, oh, that she's hard. She'd have to figure out With Teresa, just purely it's safe, it's warm. We've got a similar story. You know, he pretty much says she's very similar to me, but I'm not feeling the same sort of emotion and excitement that he had when he was talking about Leslie.
Yeah, not at all. At that point, I was like, wow, he's less into Teresa than I thought. It seems like, because, you know, we knew that they hadn't had a lot of time together and it seemed like his interest was waning. But after watching the first part of this episode, I was like, oh, he's so not into Teresa. But he did say to Jesse, she has a hole in her heart like I do.
Yes, that's true.
We both experienced the loss of a spouse and that we get each other. That seems to be the only thing that
the only connection.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to hear that comparison between the women. But I will say from there, his first date ends up being with Leslie, and I was surprised. I thought it would be with Teresa. But for some reason, they decided to go with the all-star and start with Leslie. And right away, once again, we see her running and jumping. I think the producers are asking these women to do this. Like, I've seen it so many times. They have to be asking these women to jump.
The jump hug has become a hallmark of the Bachelor franchise. So it's jump hugs, benches, and hot tubs.
Absolutely. Yes. Benches. That's true. I will agree with you that generally happens in all seasons of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette.
Oh, yeah.
Their first date is very interesting. They're going to rappel down, I guess, a cliff/waterfall. And what I liked about this moment is that she seemed very nervous about it. Like she was just like, I don't, she's like, will you be with me the whole way? He's like, don't worry about it. I will be with you. So he was already like watching out for her a little bit.
Yes. And this is a 170-foot cliff waterfall situation.
Yes.
I'll be honest. I think I would have been able to do that because you're going down backwards. Like, I think if I'm going down backwards, I'd be able to take it step by step. I would love to do that. But yes, Leslie, very, very nervous. And as she's going down, you know, she's a real trooper about it. And Gary just keeps saying, oh, no, you're doing it. They get to the bottom. He's giving her hugs and kisses. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And she's like, I'm facing my fears. This is like a metaphor for facing her you know, her issues with being vulnerable and intimate.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's like, I feel like this was a metaphor, this whole experience.
It was her breaking through whatever it was from holding her back from having true love. She just had to let herself go and go for it. They go to dinner at night, and Gary actually asked an interesting question. He said, like, you know, I've noticed that you haven't really been asking me hard questions. And I'm like, okay.
So Leslie asks, when was the last time you had sex? And, you know, she laughs and she's like, well, you told me to ask, you know, hard questions. And Gary, cheeky Gary, he appears again and says, by myself or with another person. And they have a hearty laugh over that.
They have already left. He was very funny. Like
Yes,
he
yeah,
heard the question. He almost did a spit take, which was funny.
yeah,
But then he threw it right back at her. So seeing them go back and forth was very cute.
yeah,
But he finally asked the question we've all been freaking wondering is what are we
yeah.
going to do geographically? He said, what does that look like geographically if we were to get together?
Right. And Leslie responds, I don't want to leave Minneapolis permanently. Maybe we can, share, like live in
Yep.
both, more than one place. And she mentioned them becoming bi-Midwestern instead of
Yes.
bi-coastal. And she says, we can figure it out.
I
And
know.
and Gary says, oh, you said the magic words, we can figure it out. And it makes me wonder, wait, I thought Faith said that to him in the hometowns. Didn't she say we can figure it out? I thought
Um,
that I was just
I
wondering.
I think in her, when she was talking to Jesse, she said maybe it was naive of me to think that I guess we could have, but
Oh,
to his
okay.
face, I think she said it'd be hard for me to leave my horse and my kids. So I guess the difference is that Leslie is directly saying, I will
Yeah.
be willing to travel back and forth with you.
Right.
And maybe you didn't hear that from Faith, is my
So if
guess.
Faith would have said to him in that moment during hometowns, hey, we can figure this out, maybe she would have made it to this point, to the final two. I don't know.
Um, I don't know, but I will say what was interesting is he said he wanted to make sure that this process, what he's working towards, is
Yeah.
that fully committed from death do us part. And whenever he
Yes,
said that, Leslie kind of broke down a little bit. It was
she
really
did.
a really interesting moment.
She did. She explained that, she's been married twice and that with both of those ex husbands, at the time she was married to them, she didn't feel as if till death do us part was in the cards for them, or
Yes.
that's what she wanted and it just wasn't happening. I believe she alluded to possibly, I think she mentioned being abandoned and maybe being
Mm,
cheated on. I don't know if it's the
yeah.
situations, but apparently that's all that she wants is to be with someone till death do they part. So when Gary mentioned that, she's like, yeah, like I have no problem with that commitment. I want to do that with you too. And Gary says very low, he's like, well, then we will. And
I
I'm like,
know. I was like, you're
um,
just saying it all. You're not supposed to say this stuff. I was like, this
I
is the goal. You're not supposed to say that on The Bachelor yet.
absolutely. And then he goes on to say some other stuff that he's speaking in very absolute terms with
I
her.
know.
And I'm like, this is going to get dangerous. He ends up giving her the key to fantasy suites. She
Yes.
consents. They're going to go. Oh, let's go. And in the fantasy suites, I believe it is, he recites what Trista, the first bachelorette, told him.
Man, he keeps pulling those
Oh
words
my
out of
God.
his
He
lips.
keeps saying it so much. But at least he gives Trista credit for it, doesn't claim
Yes,
it as his own
that's
pearls of
true.
wisdom. Find the woman you can't live without, not the woman you can live with. And he says to Leslie, I think you're the one.
I know.
I have to have you with my morning coffee.
I
I have to
know.
have you when I go to bed at night.
I know. I heard all those things. He's like listing things off. I was like, man, he's planning out his life with Leslie. It
Yes.
was very romantic, very
Yeah.
sweet. He was
Yes.
saying all these beautiful things to her, and she was loving it. I was loving it. I'm thinking they could work. But at the same time, I'm also thinking you do have another date. Like you do have
Yeah.
another
I,
date, but he seemed
yeah.
pretty concrete, like this is
Yeah.
it in
He
that
even
moment.
says, I'm all in.
I
So what
know.
what does that mean? At that point, I was saying to myself, can you please just end it? Just say right now, like this is it. I'm done. Sorry, Teresa. Send you on your way. Because like I was believing it too. Like
I
Leslie was
know.
believing. And listen, if he does not pick Leslie, if she's gonna be destroyed.
She'll be destroyed. And if I were Teresa and watching it back, I'd be like, excuse me.
Yeah.
I at this point, and honestly through the rest of the episode, I still think he's going to pick Leslie. I will say that we cut to them
Yeah.
the next morning, and that's when we see like I looked at him and I'm like, Gary like looks the most out of control that
Yeah.
I've seen him the entire
Oh
season
yeah.
of The Lone Bachelor. He looks, I was like, Jesus, what happened to them? He looked
Yeah.
totally like his eyes were wide open. Like everything was crazy.
Right. Well, he mentioned that he and Leslie had gone to bed 2:30, 3 o'clock that morning because they were up
Yes.
talking and canoodling, I guess. And, so he looks a mess and he's drinking coffee. He and Leslie are in bed drinking coffee together. I feel like drinking coffee is always something they focus on. Like
I
even
know.
with The Bachelorette, when we did
They did that.
Gabby and Rachel's season, it was all about people drinking coffee the day after the overnight. And they're talking and they're smiling and they're reminiscing of the night before. And then Gary mentions to the camera, he's like, people want to know, like, oh, what happens in the fantasy suites? And he's like, whatever goes on, it's nobody's effing business. I was like, whoa, they even bleeped him. I was like, what's going
He
on?
was like so passionate that he's dropping
Yeah.
the F-bomb. I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
whatever happened, it was worth the F-bomb. That's for a
I
fact.
guess so.
It was very interesting. So what's of note, we leave this date where he's confessed his love when he said concretely, you're the one.
Yep.
And then he goes on the Teresa date. And I gotta say, I don't know if you're a fan of Teresa or not. In general, people, I felt so freaking sorry for this woman. I was like, man, to be the number 2 date here, no
Yeah,
thanks.
I felt for her. I don't feel like maybe Teresa is the best match for him, but I felt for her. She really did. Yeah,
It
absolutely.
was tough. They get on the horse and you hear her. She's like, he's so quiet. He's not talking to me. What's going on? Is he
Oh
just
yeah,
focused on the horse? I know something's happening. I'm thinking, this is painful. And you could tell that Gary's probably really in his head
definitely.
thinking about specifically Leslie, but he's very quiet on the horse. He's not talking to Teresa. Then finally, they get off. They get on the bench, as you
There's a
pointed
bench in the
out.
middle of the rainforest in Costa
Happens to be
Rica.
a bench there where the monkey sits, and they get on the bench and to have the conversation when she's just like, well, what's going on? It's crazy.
One thing before we move forward with the bench convo,
Yeah.
they go horseback riding. Remember the
Yeah.
last time he went horseback riding with the lady?
Oh,
So
stop
I'm
it.
wondering if it didn't go well with Faith. So I don't know if horseback riding is kind of like, oh, that signifies that's the end of this romance.
That's his I don't know if that's what it is. I think they had it planned. They probably didn't realize to be riding a horse with Faith. But it was interesting that once again he's riding a horse.
Yes. And when they're on the bench, Teresa reiterates, I'm into you. I love you. My family loves you. You seem kind of quiet. I know that you're going through a lot with having to figure all this out. And, they have a bit of a heart to heart.
Yeah.
And, then they cut to Gary talking to the camera.
I know.
Gary tells the camera, like, I'm trying to remain open-minded. And he's like, Turner, because Gary's last name is Turner. Teresa is the ideal woman. Like, basically, like, what's wrong with you?
Yes.
He says, but he's thinking about what Leslie's doing right now.
He's like, yeah, I wonder what Leslie's doing now. I'm like, Jesus, man.
Yeah.
Pull it together. You're on a TV show. So we go from there to the dinner, and I'm a little concerned. Even then, going to the dinner, I'm like, please pull it together for Teresa. She deserves it. Give her a shot. And what's nice is that he does seem lighter at dinner, and he does start asking her questions, and he's just basically, what was of note, before he even asked her question, he said he wondered if he reached, I guess, the plateau point in the relationship. He's like, is this it in our relationship? He was going into that wondering, maybe this is it. Maybe we're not going to move any farther. I don't know.
I believe this is when Gary starts talking to the camera, and he says that his relationship with Teresa has basically stalled and that they're not exploring new ground. Mm-hmm. He said that we're just so similar. Like we've basically talked about the same stuff, and we don't know anything. It's static. It's a static relationship at this point. But he goes into the dinner trying to be kind of just like, oh, someone who just met someone, like, oh, oh, you seem like you're glowing and you seem like you've had a good time. But man, this dinner was the turning point in their romance.
They finally turned because he asked her about her career. And when he did that, she lit up. She's like, yes, it was a homemaker and etc. But apparently she had this whole other career when she was older. And she got into day trading and I guess into securities. And she's really passionate about it. And she's still doing it now.
Yep.
And then he even asked her, what's your plan with that? And she said, for, I guess more or less for the right person,
Yeah.
she would be willing to retire.
Yeah, I love how she said it. She's like, if you gave me a reason to stop, then I'll stop. And I'm like, yeah,
Yes.
because if he's got all this restaurant money, maybe she doesn't have to keep working in securities.
That is very true. That is very true. I will say that's kind of where we saw him shift. He was
Oh, yeah.
excited learning this new thing about her. She was excited sharing something different about her that he hadn't heard about. So
Yes.
it was nice to see.
He was very impressed. And Gary was very impressed by Teresa's accomplishments and ambition. And
Yeah.
I have to say, I was on that journey with him because I didn't think really much of what Teresa does outside of the show. Like I just figured, oh, it's nothing much. But she impressed me too. So I can understand him being reinvigorated and his interest reigniting for her because he's like, there's more to her than I thought. He saw her with new eyes.
I think that was a little like a turn on for him to see something different about her. And then after that, he did invite her to the fantasy suite, of course.
Yes.
Before going, she also noted that she hadn't been with someone since her husband. So this was really big if something were to happen in her life.
Yes. And she was all down for it too. The minute he said, would you like to join me for fantasy? She's like, yep.
Let's go. Like, let's get in.
Go now.
Giddy up. Yeah, she was ready. She's like, let's get on that horse. But so they go into the fantasy suite and basically she said right away, oh yeah, you sleep on the left side. He's just like, oh, how do you know that? She's like, because you told me. So she's paying attention to all these things he said in the past.
I feel like Teresa would offer Gary the traditional marital relationship.
Yes, I agree.
Probably closer to what he was used to with Tony, his departed wife. So I think that's the struggle he's going with. Do I want familiar or do I want different?
I will say, I think he wants different. I mean, we can get to that in a moment. I think he wants different because he's had familiar for, I don't know, 50 years of his life. He only has like 20 years left or something, or maybe he wants something different. But I will say, we see them making out as you do in the fantasy suites. Next morning, drinking coffee as you do in the fantasy suites. And I guess it's revealed that during the night, he did finally say to her face that he loves her. He finally said it.
Yes. Now, it was off camera, but I could swear we saw a preview at the end. Okay. So they did get it on camera, him saying, I love you, because we saw it in the preview clip for at the end of the Women Tell All episode. So why did they choose to cut that from the Fantasy Suites episode? Why did they just tell us? He tells us just off oh yeah, it happened off camera. That I said, but they did tape it, but they didn't show it.
I don't know. It might have been the last episode we saw was him saying that he said it, as opposed to us actually seeing him do it. But it sounds like he probably did it in private. But once again in the morning, they kissed, they drank their coffee, and he said something along the lines of like, "This could be the first day of the rest of my life."
He did say that. He
something
did
along those lines.
I was a little shocked. He said they really got to know each other and that they understand each other on a fundamental level. Now, before when he said that, he made it sound like, it was just ho-hum, we understand each other. But now he's saying it with like a glint in his eye and a song in his heart. So he's definitely changed his opinion. And now I feel like Teresa is a formidable opponent for Leslie.
I don't think so. I know basically the episode ends there with Gary looking for Lauren of like, I have two of these amazing women, who will I choose? I think it's going to be Leslie because as you said, Teresa is familiar and he likes it and it's warm and it's safe, but he's excited. And at that age, as he said in the past, if something new comes along, it's exciting. He's experiencing something different, specifically with Leslie. Whether or not she actually wants to get married is neither here nor there. But I do think he has stronger feelings for Leslie.
Yeah.
Teresa.
I agree. I agree that right now, Leslie is probably who he's going to pick. I am curious about what happens in the finale episode on November 30th, because you see Gary's daughters meeting they're involved. They
Yes.
get to meet Teresa and Leslie, and they're speaking to Gary about one of them. We don't know which, and they seem to have doubts, saying they didn't think that this person was really in it for the long haul. So I was thinking they had to be talking about Leslie, because I can't imagine Teresa giving off any energy that was, oh, this is just short term.
No.
So
I
don't
agree.
know.
I saw the same thing. I think it
Yeah.
was probably Leslie being like, "Oh, well, I've been married twice before, and we'll see." And Teresa's like, "Yes, of course. I know what side of the bed he sleeps on. I'll fold his underwear, whatever." So they probably see Teresa already in that role, but maybe he doesn't want that role anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. But what I do like is, even if Leslie does win, because she is the favorite, because essentially this is winning in some sense of the word. I am glad that Teresa will go down fighting, because like I was afraid it was going to be that everyone knows she's not going to get him, because she's just not, it's not happening on the screen with them. But they really did connect in a way that I'm like, good, she'll finish strong. I guess that's what I mean. Like, she might not win, but Teresa's gonna finish strong. And I'm glad
you're like
that.
like assistant coach. It doesn't matter as long as you give it your best.
Yes. Are there any other? Oh, I have a random comment. They did a close up on the note that Gary gives Leslie and Teresa, and it's a note with the key to the fantasy suites, and it's this whole thing about, oh, if you decide to go to your separate not to go to your separate rooms, and it says from Jesse, right? So the whole note is supposedly handwritten by Jesse. Do you think it's actually handwritten by Jesse?
Oh, of course not. Come on.
Okay.
Come on.
Because I really dug the handwriting. I was like, oh, he's got fantastic handwriting.
He didn't write that. He didn't write that. Just like he doesn't come with the lines on the show. There's a writer who's coming up with it, and a writer who put that down on paper.
Okay. All right. So he's just a pretty face.
Just a pretty face and a good host. That's it.
There you go. So let's see. Thanksgiving week is hiatus, and then after that, November 30th is the finale, and we'll do our recap and try to get it out as soon as we can.
There you go. Sounds good to me.
Well, that's all we have for you. What we learned from week 8 is that talking about your successful job in finance gets Gary hot.